The economic shutdown of America in response to the Wuhan coronavirus could quite possibly be one of the most damaging, reckless, and blatantly unconstitutional policy decisions of recent history. It's even been coined the Great Suppression by popular libertarian economist Gene Epstein. The decision of state governors to physically and mentally force people into self-isolation via Orwellian stay-at-home orders, coupled with a 3-month-long prohibition on commerce and gatherings, even longer in some states, resulted in now more than 30 million Americans losing their jobs and levied more than $3 trillion of new federal debt onto the backs of taxpayers. The lockdown is also liable for the closure of 1.8 million U.S. small businesses, a third of them permanently.
I have to give up my business that I worked 25 years, sacrificed my life for, okay? For coronavirus, I'll take coronavirus over losing my business.
10 years of working for something and then getting it, and then to have it taken away at no fault of your own, that's a hard pill to swallow.
And perhaps even more troubling than the sudden devastation wrought on America's economy is the duplicitous nature of the origins of the lockdown. How the media, health consultants, and city administrators were able to exploit the fear of good people and convince them of a strategy that was both unscientific and provenly unlawful.
We have to remember nothing like this has ever happened in American history, much less even in all world history, where house arrest becomes universal. It wasn't even advocated by doctors. It was a consequence of political panic and a media frenzy and public fear and just bad, shocking policy all around. And there's going to be hell to pay.
At this point, what is your expectation of how much of these job losses will be permanent?
Clearly, not everyone will go back, but I would say many will go back. But my assumption is that there will be a significant chunk, well into the millions, well into the millions of people who don't get to go back to their old job, and in fact, there may not be a job in that industry for them for some time. There will eventually be, but it could be some years before we get back to those people finding jobs.
For the last 5 months, Americans have been bullied and punished by political elites who decided, in their wisdom, to mask us, take away our jobs, depress our economic prospects, order us indoors, and fine us if we dare not comply.
You're violating a governor order. I highly suggest you go home.
A totally nonsensical strategy that we've collectively been coerced into accepting as scientific. You can't go to a bar, the beach, or get a haircut, but congested supermarkets and mass protests are fine. Making a living is deemed non-essential, but that's just the price we have to pay for safety. The selective enforcement and biased media coverage of these lockdowns has emboldened not only our politicians to wreak havoc on our communities, but also gave rise to a class of pandemic Gestapo who saw it fit to socially regulate our lives and berate the public with fear and vicious authoritarianism.
You think it's a good idea to be doing this with the stay-at-home order? COVID-19.
That's not right at all. And he's too close, and that would make me uncomfortable, I'll tell you. 6 feet apart when you talk to people? Are you sure?
Wear your mask, wear your gloves.
So, be looking out for those cops.
All right, I will. I'll be looking out for those cops.
Sheltering in place. Go ahead, put me on social media. You're a little pups. And seriously, I called the cops. I can't wait.
Okay. I'm so scared.
The intent of the COVID mob could have been sincere, but the tactics employed created a landscape of anxiety and distrust that led many to rightfully question the legitimacy of the lockdown altogether.
Are you sick?
Am I sick? No, and I want to say that.
I'm not sick either. So why are they quarantining healthy people?
People just assume that this pandemic must be terrible. It's the new black plague, that basically everybody's going to die, and people were willing to give it a chance for maybe a couple of weeks, even though the trauma was real and disorienting. But as time has gone on, we've come to realize that is not the case, and that a lot of these lockdown orders were imposed illegally. Now they're being challenged and rejected in Wisconsin and Oregon because it violates everything we believe about America. That we have rights, we can travel, we can associate, we can keep our businesses open and serve consumers, and that their homes, whether and to what extent we want to stay in, was up to us. Suddenly all that was over, and that imposed a tremendous psychological shock.
I have a permit. I get permits.
Right.
You
got the permit before the stay-at-home order went into
I can't
place.
understand what you're saying. Back up and remove the mask.
There is something weirdly pre-modern about this. The idea that a virus is here and the only thing you can do is run away and hide from it, just put yourself in a refrigerator box and wait until it's gone, as if the virus is going to move back to Wuhan or to the planet it came from. We're all going to live safely ever after. That's an attitude that was very common in the ancient world, and it was used selectively even up to the 1918 flu pandemic in this country that was devastating. There were various lockdowns in Chicago and San Francisco, selective. But then we discovered an application of germ theory to disease mitigation in the 1930s with smallpox vaccines and the other vaccines. We realized that human beings can coexist with viruses through natural immunities, especially in absence of a vaccine.
With early vaccine trials showing promising results, death rates and hospitalizations plummeting, America should be celebrating its budding immune response. But media pundits like Anthony Fauci have only worked to incite more worry and panic amongst the general public and financial markets.
It's a false narrative to take comfort in a lower rate of death. There's so many other things that are very dangerous and bad about this virus. Don't get yourself into false complacency.
The evidence doesn't support this incessant pessimism lobbied from the CDC, but as we now know, the end goal was never to provide Americans with the facts. The media's fueling of this completely ineffective quarantine has exposed their poor ethics and sinister political motivations.
You panicked about the market, panicked about COVID, panicked about the ventilators, panicked about the PPE, panicked about ever going out again, panicked that we'd ever get back to normal.
Joseph, you didn't panic about anything.
That? What good is it? Why not help people keep their head? I understand that.
100,000 people died, Joe, and all you did was try to help your friend, the president. That's what you did. Every single morning on this show.
I think the media is really taken on the chin through this whole thing. I mean, you turn on the news, you don't get news, you just get frenzy. And these people act like mobs. People think reporters are independent, intelligent people trying to tell you the facts. No. What they do is they figure out what the line is, and they just have to file the next report. We also have a 24-hour news cycle. And so they always have to have news. And they love nothing better than whipping up a frenzy, whether it's about a virus or a hurricane or, whatever the thing is. So this is their model that they've used to get views, and they've used it this time in a way that's unbearably irresponsible. It's actually one of the most remarkable things. We're so pompous, we think we can control the world through politics. The virus doesn't care anything about your politics. The virus is a honey badger, and we need to figure out intelligent ways to mitigate it. And you have to have openness in order to behave intelligently. I would say that the people that are arguing for continued closures, and I think it's this tiny minority that's out of their minds, these are people who watch television. If you turn on the television, that's the one message you get. They're saying, if you open, you're going to get more cases. Well, probably. Maybe. Actually, we don't even know that. But let's say it's true. You're going to get more cases. Cases is not the same thing as deaths. All right? So the more cases you get, that much lower falls the infection fatality ratio. It's like a basic point of math. So these people don't understand viruses. They don't understand math. And they clearly don't understand freedom. It's actually amazing when you look at the difference of the media now as versus, say, 70 years ago. I was looking at the New York Times from the 1950s, the very devastating and deadly 1957 Asian flu of 1957. New York Times, what was their advice at the time? Stay calm, stay rational, go about your business, leave this to the medical professionals. We'll let the doctors take care of this one. We have modern methods now. We understand disease. Everybody should just go about their business. I mean, like the New York Times advocating calm measures. And really, they only ran like one or two editorials about that. 116,000 Americans died from the Asian flu of 1957 and 58. And that was in a population of only 200 million. So proportionally, that's far more deadly than what we're dealing with now. And the media at the time was either ignoring it completely or, to the extent they spoke about it at all, urged people to go about their business and just use intelligence calm. Now, that's a different generation of media. Of course, we didn't have 24-hour news cycles. We have to fill up everything with his nonsense all the time. So maybe it's hard to know what made the difference this time. There's a lot of factors that play into it, but the 24-hour news cycle is got to be part of that.
By and large, liberal media outlets and syndicate journalism has positioned itself as an explicitly anti-freedom front, censoring dissidents and calling for more government control over our lives. But some principled liberals did choose to question and rebel against the new normal. Notably, Bill Maher, host of HBO's Real Time.
I don't know if you read this story this week about, I didn't realize this, in 1968 and 69, we had the Hong Kong flu, and somebody named Jeffrey Tucker wrote an article and said, well, it was funny, he said they let Woodstock go on. And it was a very bad flu. If you extrapolate the numbers, given the population of the country, and we were way less obese, it could have killed like 250,000 people back then. But they handled it very differently. No, there was no closings. The stock market didn't crash. The schools were open. You can go to a restaurant. Woodstock, like I said, the view was, yes, let the people who are not vulnerable to it. Of course, there's always going to be some who will die of anything. Let them lead their lives and protect the vulnerable and leave it as a medical problem. It was not something they thought back then, I think, on either side of the aisle was appropriate for the government to get involved in.
Before the erroneous claims popularized by Fauci, Ferguson, and other tools of the deep state, the advised strategy for pandemic response looked nothing like the heavy-handed government lockdowns we see today. In 2006, a team of epidemiologists presented a paper titled Disease Mitigation Measures in the Control of Pandemic Influenza at the request of the Bush administration's Bioterrorism Unit. One doctor was particularly disturbed by the ideas in favor of mass quarantine tactics like closing schools, travel bans, and limits on public gatherings, warning politicians that such a strategy would, quote, result in significant disruption of the societal functioning of communities and result in possibly serious economic problems. A more appropriate strategy, according to the author, was to allow the virus to spread naturally, isolate and treat those who get sick, and work quickly to develop a vaccine while minimally disrupting the lives of millions. That lone voice of sanity was Dr. Donald A. Henderson.
Dr. Donald A. Henderson, who was born in 1928 and died in 2016, knew more than anybody on the planet Earth about viruses and flus and pandemics, and he's credited with the eradication of smallpox. He wrote a brilliant article in 2006 against the modelers who were advocating lockdowns and various forced separation of people and the canceling of events and the closing of schools and all this kind of stuff. And he said, this is all a disaster. You will take a manageable disease and turn it into a catastrophe. And he further said that these methods that we're using right now in this country were more commonly believed 50 years ago. So 50 years ago, he means like in the 1940s. Since then, we discovered theory of herd immunity. We discovered how viruses actually work and how they circulate in the population, how no political efforts you ever undertake can do anything to stop their spread. It's even arguable whether it can slow it down. Or if you can slow it down, why you would slow it down, because that just means prolonging the pain. So it was Donald Henderson himself who said that these are all pre-modern and unscientific, and advocated that the right policy in the presence of a virus is to continue normal social function as much as possible. Don't cancel large events. Don't cancel schools. Certainly don't cancel churches. And don't cancel businesses, and don't confine people to their homes, which is actually going to spread the disease. And that we need to focus our disease mitigation strategies on those who are vulnerable. And as soon as we find out who are vulnerable, we should be focused only on them. And then otherwise let the virus spread, burn itself out, and we could have been over this pandemic a long time ago. So the very first news we got in this country of the virus arriving was out of a Seattle nursing home, all right? If we were smart, we would have said, oh, there's a problem in nursing homes and among the demographic that lives in nursing homes. And it turns out, of course, after all these months, we know from countries around the world that 36 to 60% of the deaths associated with coronavirus come out of nursing homes. So we, instead of dealing with nursing homes intelligently, we had places like California, New York, and New Jersey actually forcing COVID-sick patients into nursing homes, which is just a death sentence. So that's what we did. What a disaster. So D.A. Henderson, I think, was exactly right. And it's really a tragedy. I mean, he died in 2016. He did leave a magnificent treatise for us to explain to us how to deal with disease. But unfortunately, that wasn't the blueprint that the policymakers used. Instead, they used fear-mongering by these model builders, public panic, media frenzy, and political ignorance, and destroyed the world. That's a short history of what happened.